So I invite Aruna now. The presentation will be on philosophical explorations of the teacher-pupil relationship. 30 minutes of presentation, we can open it up for. Thank you.
Good evening, all of you. Before starting my presentation, I would like to talk briefly about my background. I am a research scholar at Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And before joining JNU last year, I was teaching mathematics to students at upper primary level to secondary level in a formal school setup for around 6 years. At a practicing level, that is with respect to teaching, I got involved in deeper questions like what is teaching, what should be taught to young learners, what is the nature of learners, who in my case were children, and how do I organize my teaching practice to bring about worthwhile teaching experiences for the learners. Well, I do not claim to have found all the answers to all these questions, but I claim that I revisit these questions on a regular basis, and the present paper titled Philosophical Examination of Teacher-Pupil Relationship in Contemporary Education is a small outcome of this engagement. So before beginning my presentation, I would like to make it clear that it is not a technical or deeply analytical in philosophical sense, and not being a native English speaker, I may make certain categorical mistakes as well as routine grammatical ones. So I request the experts sitting here to bear with me, and I hope to bring out certain relevant questions for all of us, and especially for new entrants into the field of education to think over. So my paper examines human relational aspects with respect to educational process with a specific focus on teacher-pupil relationship. At an outset, when we think about the teacher-pupil relationship, it is simply identified as that of the teacher and the taught, wherein an X is teaching Y to P. Even though this conception should end the matter there, it is simply not considered sufficient. And it is commonplace to extend the teacher-pupil relational aspects to prescriptions like a teacher is like a mother or a father to the student. And in Hindi we say that शिक्षक और छात्र का नाता पिता और पुत्र के समान होना चाहिए. गुरु अपने शिष्यों के लिए कुम्हार के समान होता है. गुरु को एक माली की तरह होना चाहिए. We are not satisfied with simplistic understanding, and thus we tend to imagine the ideal relationship that has to be shared between the teacher and the taught, and hence we enter into the realm of what should be. As per my experience goes, I was often told by my colleagues at school, by my teachers during in-service training, and sometimes by higher authorities in school that you should be like a parent to the students. Your students will only trust you if you are like a friend to them. And sometimes the same people would say, if you become too friendly to your students, they will never take you seriously. Teachers should be like a guide who takes her students in the right direction to the correct destination. Now, these seemingly simple prescriptive remarks indeed create an impasse, as they appear to be contradictory, and hence one can easily conclude that they are indeterminable and will remain unresolved forever. Now, in such a case, what should a teacher do? If she wants to really resolve this matter, one avoidable thing to do is to think. So did I. I took recourse to philosophy and tried to resolve the matter of what is or should a teacher-pupil relationship be at an ideational level at the best. So I chose to pose the following questions to myself, and the remaining presentation will try to touch upon the probable answers to these. First question is, what is education? Second, what is teaching? Third, will the answers to the above two questions resolve the questions of relationship? Fourth, if not, then what is it that other thinkers have to say about this? Now, for this, I tried to explore many thinkers and their expositions on this aspect. I could not clearly find this particular usage of this phrase of teacher-pupil relationship, but I saw that many writers through the secondary reading have adopted many ideas of many people, also from Indian philosophers. And on the basis of secondary reading, I chose to present an exposition, small, very brief expositions on Martin Buber's, Buber, Nell Noddings and Ponty's phenomenological methodology. I do not claim to understand these technical aspects of these, but somehow I found they are trying to come up with certain formulations. And I don't know how philosophically correct they are. So I think we all can think about all these things. So before the first question, I think I should quickly respond, though it is very deep and very large a question. But if we ask what is education, then answer to this question is and has been found out by many thinkers and philosophers. And I seek to choose Dewey's understanding, and probably of many others, that education is a social function, securing direction and development in immature individuals through their participation in the life of the group to which they belong. Thus, it is established that education has to be a social process, and a truly democratic society should make provisions for all members to participate in the process of making a social ideal, which gives individuals a personal interest in social relationships. Hence, the conception of education is a process which ensures continuity of this ever-developing society through transmission of shared experiences and communication of thoughts, ideas, knowledge, and aspirations. Now, this conception of education implies two kinds of educative experiences. One that happens through a social intercourse of young learners with that of our immediate social milieu, and the other which is more formal and institutionalized in order to inculcate learning in the young members of the society. The second kind has become rather indispensable a process till date, as it is to be seen that there is a wide gap between the capacities of a young, immature human being and the concerns of the adult world. Thus, it is established that this formal institutionalized education must have individuals who formally train, guide, and direct the young minds towards this democratic ideal of the society through their constant interaction and a reflexive process that aims to balance the whole idea of education with that of instruction. The understanding that have been presented in a compact form here deserve much deeper analysis with respect to the second kind of processes, because of which all of us have gathered here. Given that a backdrop is set to conceptualize the role of formal education and that of educator in it, it is required within the purview of this paper to focus upon teacher-pupil relationship as perceived by various thinkers that I've mentioned, and to discuss the efficacy of each in formulating an ideal that makes the process of education more enriched and not mechanical. First of all, the direct implication of conception of formal education lies in the created artificial environment, which is well confined within classroom situation or a designed situation. This is artificial in the sense that nowhere in the nature there exists such a conception of education of the young in a systematic manner and as a directed, controlled transmission of knowledge and subject matter. But this classroom setting certainly separates the teacher and the taught, in the sense that the former has the freedom to exercise her control over the latter. She has powers to convene the class and set up circumstances which favor a teaching-learning process or otherwise. Herein lays the need to examine these statements and explore the ideas which attribute the teacher a mediational role. And secondly, the conception of education as democratic ideal sets up a need to verify the shared relationship between the teacher and the learner. Now, I would talk about teaching as a necessity of education. Given the aspect of learning as a necessary condition of education to take place in individuals, it is also implied that in order to bring out learning, teaching is necessary. Even though many approaches of learning do not agree with this fact, For example, many psychological theories discard the need of teaching for learning to take place, and philosophers like Rousseau indeed propounded natural learning in individuals. But now it is beyond debate whether learning takes place naturally or in a controlled environment only. But the fact that all that is learned by an individual need not be counted as a process of education sets up a certain specific kinds of learning as educational and not all. And I think this is Peter and Hurst's conception of learning. Now, hence, it can be followed that if learning has some specific objective conditions to be called as educational, then certainly to fulfill these conditions, it is required that they are met with some special ways of deliberations, like structuring, planning, creating a systematic environment, and specific methods to be employed. For example, to learn an abstract concept of algebra, it is needed that some deliberate efforts are taken by the learner, like firstly to recognize the need to do so, then to find the means to learn it. Now, this example also hints to the fact that the mentioned deliberations cannot be naturally discerned by at least a growing, fun-loving child, given the abstractness and lack of immediate use of algebra to her. Thus, it can indeed be said that even many aspects of what is to be learned and why it cannot be easily interpreted by an immature individual without an input from someone who finds the need and has the intention to bring out learning in the former. The point here is that for some specific learning to take place, some specific conditions are necessary, and these can be more effectively met with by taking up certain deliberate measures. Teaching certainly provides with these measures. Now, what is the role of teacher in this? After establishing that learning as a necessary condition for education and teaching as a facilitation, or I don't know if this is the correct word, but teaching as a process for the former in the lines of Hurst's philosophy of education, it is important to discuss the role of teacher to bring out the necessary conditions of teaching. Teaching is certainly not mere instructing and not only a way of transmission of knowledge, but these constitute parts of teaching. The process of teaching is distinguished by the way philosophy of education defines it, and it does it in three ways. First, teaching is said to happen when something is done with an intention to bring out learning in an individual. The process which indicate or explicitly illustrate what is to be learned constitute teaching process. This is the second condition. And the third condition is these processes are done with the recognition of capacities of the learner. Now, these three categories form the necessary conditions for an activity to be called as teaching activity at the least, but certainly not the sufficient ones. It is for the educator now to contemplate and do a good enough thinking to discern why, what, and how to bring out these three categories of teaching processes in practice, and this is indeed served by a deeper philosophizing into the aims of education, the aspects of knowledge, curriculum, and subject matter, and finally the methodology to be employed to bring out a balance between the three. This makes it rather more complex, but completely indispensable aspect of teaching process, and indeed sets up grounds for the discernment of the role of the teacher in bringing out learning in true sense. Now, this discussion of role of teachers as critical mediators of knowledge paves way to explore the conception of how this role can be played more effectively and whether there is a need to assess the relational aspect of this mediation with that of the learner. Philosophically, this relational aspect can be drawn from principles of ethics and that of morality. Now, the three thinkers whom I'm going to discuss from here try to bring forth their thoughts on human relations, a conscious need of re-examination of teacher-pupil relationship through the same. They point to the fact that this re-examination is difficult without understanding that teachers are dealing with other humans and not objects. And thus, there is a need to accept that the ideal methods cannot be employed with the learners unless the relationship between the teacher and the taught is discerned and established. This relational aspect involves caring for the other, aspects of morality, and scope for dialogue. further discussions will be centering on this idea of shared relationship between the teacher and the student, as I told. And I'm not an expert on these three thinkers that I'm going to speak about, but I have brought out their expositions based on secondary readings that I earlier mentioned. But why I do so is that I see that these fall into three categories of talking about human relational aspects. One of it, which is the dialogic aspect, the second, which is of ethics of care aspect, and the third is a phenomenological, a kind of methodological aspect through phenomenology. So, and two important questions that I want to throw open to this forum is that firstly, is there a need to philosophize the teacher-student relationship in the kind of education where the role of teacher is well defined? Secondly, is it enough to talk about the ethical dimensions of teaching practice in terms of deontic and virtue ethics? Now, I would briefly talk about Buber. Born in Vienna in 1878, Martin Buber was a Jewish thinker. He was a theologian and philosopher at Frankfurt University during 1923 and 1933. He has contributed to the philosophy and religious studies through his diverse writings and immense philosophizing into the issues of peaceful coexistence between the Palestinian Arabs and the Jews through adult education. On dialogue in education and teacher-pupil relationship, also, he has spoken in his famous book, The I and Thou. And it addresses the idea of dialogue and its essence in education. He has tried to question the traditional authoritarian forms of education and the idea of transmitting established knowledge established knowledge, and on the contrary, he has perceived education as a process of dynamic interaction between the educator and the learner, and their mutuality to know and to be known. For him, both the teacher and the taught are in a mutual bond, wherein the former is concerned with the other and believes in the student's capacity to make his own judgment. The idea is in contrast to the demand of pupil to submit in front of the teacher and follow the rule of obedience in the traditional paradigm. According to him, the teacher need not be a superhuman with godliness endowed, but he should be present in the original form to the learner and should have readiness to change as well as to be changed in the process. This brings forth that the child indeed is bestowed with some inherent capacities, and so is the teacher, but their mutuality is what gives these capacities an educational nature. He beautifully discusses two primary human relations, I and thou, and I and it, where the former involves the recognition of mutuality in the relationship and acknowledgement of the otherness. The direct implication of this idea to education is that the learners deserve to be treated as individuals and not as things that need to be changed in the teaching-learning process. This kind of relationship involves reciprocity, while on the other side, I-it kind of relations are based upon unidirectional subject-object relationships, where the subject has the powers to manipulate and exploit the other. The I-thou conception gives tremendous scope to participation and dialogue. The prerequisite for this dialogic bond is the element of freedom and spontaneity to be allowed in the learner and teachers. And the teacher here plays a role of a guide and critic and someone who offers something new to the learner. This is what describes a relationship through which knowledge comes alive and the learner can integrate her new learning with that already known to her. Now, Buber proposes that teacher exercises autonomy through a process of internalizing and restructuring theory and method. There should be conscious selection of experiences to be shared with the learner beyond mere imitation of the subject knowledge. In this process, the questioning attitude and disposition to meet the crisis that the learner is undergoing should be kept in mind by the teacher. While speaking about the extent of this shared relationship, Buber cautions that in considering the child as the other, it is not needed that the child need to conform with all the, as the other, it is not needed to conform with and approve all child's desire, but it is needed that an example is set for the child to discern self-discipline through the conduct of the educator. There is a need for respectful distance between the teacher and the learner so that no kind of emotional or practical dependency is allowed. Now I'll briefly present the excerpts of Nell Nodding's philosophy. Nell Noddings comes up with, she's an American feminist, educationalist, and a philosopher best known for her works in philosophy of education, education theory, and ethics of care. Now, she basically comes with this ethical perspective on the basis of the care ethics, the imperative of teacher being as a caring person to the learner. And she exposes that acts of caring should cause favorable outcomes for the one cared for, and the caring should establish an educational association. The teacher is one who cares, encourages the growth of a complete human being, one who is active, striving, and feels deeply. Noddings suggests that a feeling of combination of reflective and reflexive is the dynamic force in the relationship of teacher and the pupil. This means that a teacher has to be a reflective thinker about the behaviors of the learner, as well as she should be reflexively analytical of her own approaches in teaching and interacting with the students. This caring relationship transcends the human relationships, as the goal it is to transform the student into a free adult, free from dependence upon the educator. Nodding's exposition has a moral underpinning, and it is that of the moral experiences of acceptance of the otherness, synonymous to Buber's idea. Teachers, every act has aspects of morality attached, which involves acceptance of the student as a person capable of growth, talent, and character. So to summarize Nodding's stand on education, it can be said that relational ethics prioritize concerns for relationship. Noddings accepts that justice-based approaches, which are supposed to be more masculine and genuine alternatives to ethics of care. However, Noddings believe that caring rooted in receptivity, relatedness, and responsiveness is a more basic and preferable approach to ethics. Now, I move on to the phenomenological methodology, which is derived from Merleau-Ponty, who is a phenomenologist and an existential philosopher of 20th century, along with Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. He describes phenomenology as a study of essence of existence of human beings and the world based on human experience, which need not always be described with presuppositions of innate clarity or objectivity. This ideation implicates into teacher-pupil relationship to one based on experience rather than a goal-oriented one to unfold the unknown or to perfect some practice that is objectively educational. For him, both the teacher and the taught carry a burden of insecurity, apprehension in dealing with each other. This is a kind of ambiguity that prevails in the educational endeavor, and it is thus difficult to point out anything that is ideal in any human interaction. He thus perceives the teacher-student relationship as what it is rather than what it should be. For him, the student and the teacher live in a shared world where the latter facilitates the experiences of the former as a result of their meeting. The relation between the two is an evolving one and cannot be defined in absolute terms. It is rather an interdependent relationship where each one of the students and the teacher is the tacit observer of the other. Essentially, teacher would exist if and only if the student exists. The teacher's sensitivity and insight are crucial in guiding, explaining, and permitting the student-centeredness. The teacher-student relationship connects the past experience of the teacher to the present of the learner in the view of the future of the learner. Now, this discussion describes the metaphysical aspects of teacher-pupil relationship and indeed require a deeper insight into the literature of contemporary philosophy. But the point intended here is that the process of education, to be discerned fully, need at least an account of what it is that gives the process of education a human touch, rather than that of abstractness of the concept. Knowledge and role of teacher as defined simplistically or in an abstract manner. I now move on to the critical analysis of these three seemingly interconnected but subtly different approaches of discerning teacher-pupil relationship based on transcendentalism, drawing from ethics, and lastly from phenomenology. These three discussions are identical in one respect, that all the three posit teachers to be reflective as well as reflexive. This indeed seems to be a prerequisite for progressive teaching. Discussion of the self roles and relationship of the self with the other here indicates a child-centered paradigm to teaching and learning, unlike the traditional teacher-centered one. The teacher in all the discussed perspectives has a significant role to play and has to be more conscious of shared relationship with the pupil, because the learner is unaware of the intentional discursive interchange that is happening and the fact that she is getting transformed. Certainly, the three discussions bring forth the larger idea of democratic approach in education, and somewhere indicate that greater reflections will certainly lead to democratic ideal of education. The only limiting aspect of the three is the ignorance of circumstantial limitations faced by the teacher in the classroom discourse, and they are in some way individualized in the sense that they propound an understanding of the relationship between an individual teacher with a particular student. Though the idea can be extended to a community of teachers and that of students, but practically it sounds a great deal of altruism on the part of the teacher to be played, since it is extremely tough to deal with each and every student in the great details given the systemic constraints of schooling in the present times. However, the ideas can be further explored to examine various child-centered pedagogical approaches which we discuss in the schools nowadays. And I see also there are some implications for aims of education through this discussion, through raising of this relational aspect. And what I see is that it has, as the present day discourse in education is wrought by conflicting situations, theories that bring forth the idea of cultural hegemony and teachers playing the pioneering role in maintaining it. When we talk about all these things, I think if we also give a thought to such aspects, we may come up with some certain solutions, or we may try to think in a different manner if we try to idealize or conceptualize teacher-student relationships in this manner. And also that this the authoritarian teacher-centered practices which consider students to be mere objects to be transformed into individual will be again can be thought about in a more critical manner when we just make such proposition or make such assertions in an unthinking manner. So we can think in this manner, in the way these thinkers have tried to bring forth their ideas and understandings about this. So finally, I just want to say that I think this aspect of teacher-pupil relationship needs a deeper philosophizing, and somewhere I don't know if the analytical way to do so is enough, or is it will it bring out certain solutions? And on the other hand, when we talk about such philosophies as presented, the phenomenological methods and dialogic aspects, how do we understand them as well? Because it is not that we do not talk about all these things in our practice. Also, I don't know, and can we do without even thinking about all this? This is the main thing I wanted to say, and I hope I have tried to justify what I have tried to do in this. And I also know that there are many inconsistencies in this, but let us see if we can come up with certain more coherences and understanding in this. Yeah.
Thank you, Aruna. I think that was a good attempt to bring together and, to talk about the differences as well as commonalities between Buber, Ponti and Nell Noddings. So let's open it up for discussion, and many hands going up, so I request Ajita, we can start from, we start from here, Ajita.
Where?
One, here.
Aruna madam, I would like your comment on this interesting relationship between pupil and the teacher. A student of mine whom I taught English literature, who had a great respect for my age and my knowledge, she learnt very well. She was a very good student of mine. After many years, coincidentally...
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I would like you to hold the mic a bit closer. Sure. I'm not able to hear you.
Sure. So, did you get the point that I said just now?
No.
I had a student of my own.
Yeah.
She learnt English literature from me in a college. And then, coincidentally, after many years, at a very late age, when I wanted to learn computer, I joined the Computer Institute, and where the same student became my official teacher, for whom I had a great respect for her computer knowledge, and she also was very confidently teaching it to me. So, any comment on this, where teacher-pupil relationship can transcend the age difference, and in both cases it was ideal teacher and student relationship.
You want to take questions together, Aruna, or you want to answer them one by one?
Yeah. Personally, I could not see it as a question per se. I mean, yeah, you want to see, yeah. Certainly, all these, small instances, in fact, raise thinking or provoke us to think about the fact that how do we relate now, and that's what I'm trying to say here. That's it. Like you taught her, and then now she has become your teacher.
Official teacher.
Official teacher. Yeah. So this I don't know how do I say that it is not a good thing or not a. I mean it's
a good thing.
It's a good thing certainly. And then
I myself have appreciated this. Now in the age of information technology, there could be a grandson teaching his grandfather. So these are the age of, in the new age, we have to understand this kind of relationship could be possible there. And it's a highly wonderful and appreciative experience for me.
Thank you, Aruna. That was, a very good presentation. It kind of provoked more reflection. I was thinking that maybe when we're thinking philosophically about teacher-student relationship, we should also address the deep dilemmas a teacher is likely to face, which is the dialectics of the relationship, which exists probably in any human relation. For example, the tension between freedom and discipline. How much choice of learning or not learning should I give to the student? If the student simply refuses that, well, he or she doesn't want to learn something which I see as relevant and the student doesn't, then what do I do? Second, I'm just reminded of a student, somebody who refused to believe in the theory of gravity. She said, well, I think the scientists are all wrong. And I think we are all stuck to the earth because of pressure from above. Whatever. She had her own explanation. I kept thinking, if I was in the place of the teacher, should what is it that, should I just leave her with her own conceptions of reality, or should I put in more effort to show, well, this is the accepted scientific fact, so to say, or scientific knowledge, which is actually publicly validated knowledge. So should I? Do I have a responsibility to bring her there, or should I leave it there? All I mean is that no relationship is that way free from dilemmas of this sort, and I guess teachers definitely have to face this all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for your comment.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really good. But I was wondering, like, when you talk about this, maybe you might have, because I missed like the first few minutes of your presentation. So maybe you might have talked about this, but it was a bit, maybe you want to make it a bit clear that what is this is very specific about this teacher-student relationship, because what the three thinkers that you mentioned actually talk about either the ethics of care or like this phenomenological approach of approaching the other, which is but this is about any relationship, right? Like what I got a sense is it's a very general conception of how we should approach anyone.
Yeah.
Like being reflective and reflexive is something which we should do with anyone, like even with a stranger. Like I think Buber's idea is also like, or Ponty also says, how should you behave to strangers? How should you behave to people other than that? So sometimes, I don't know, like just a bit of analytical clarity of what is this specific thing about teacher-student relationship. And maybe an idea which you could explore a bit more if you want to think about is like maybe this thing is happening within a different kind of context, or maybe within a certain form of, also there might be a certain form of power relationship which might exist. There is a knower like which might still know a bit more than the other person, or like, and something which you didn't really point out is that a teacher-student relationship, there is a plurality there between teacher singular and like the students, because like it is also affecting, like it's not only, and most of these theories are dealing with individual relationships, and that's why I said like it might be missing the mark, because what we need to talk about in the classroom, the teacher is dealing with students. So how I deal with one student also affects other students. So it might affect my relationship with other students, or how I negotiate with one might affect the other. So there is a different context of relationship, and there is a different understanding of relationship which is coming up. So I don't know, like what do you think about that? And maybe this, yeah, thank you.
So at an outset, the whole point here is that yes, a practitioner undergoes all these dilemmas, and then there is no end to it. And when analytically conceptualizations happen, they try to give it certain well-defined character. So I don't know whether it is sufficient to do. Like there is ethical practice, and then there is professional ethics that we speak about, which gives a very clear idea about what should be and what should not be. But then when we get into the real practice, we encounter such questions, and thus we enter into the realm which is so wide and so undefined that somehow such conceptualization of aspects of relating to every other human beings enter into the picture. And that's what my question is. Why can't we, or can we indeed think in these terms in an educational aspect, in an educational relationship, or in an educational scenario? That's the whole point that I'm trying to say. And because there are experts here, I would like to hear from them if there is time. And if they are interested to speak on this. Yes, Vikas.
Okay. I would like to highlight certain aspects of Buber's theory, because that's what I have worked on.
Wait, I forgot to mention that he has also been a great help in discussing these aspects, because it is also his area of research, and he's working on this aspect, and he has been a good help to me and to formulate my thoughts, and also to make a presentation in an organized manner. Yes, thank you.
See, if we try to understand this in a different way, we can begin with the idea of a human being.
Yes.
So for Buber or for Nell Nordins, human beings are not essentially cognitive beings. They are holistic. Cognition is one part of it. So in line with this assumption, all human relations cannot be conceptualized in cognitive way. There will be some aspect of it which would elude cognitive formulations, rational formulations. So when we speak of defining relationships, what we ought to do, what we ought not to do, then probably here we would have to refrain and we would have to give some space to the unpredictable, to the otherness of the other to manifest itself, and give space to ourselves also to relate in a particular way or in an unpredictable, unthought of way. So rules cannot be developed here. Secondly, when we talk about existential concerns, then rather than autonomy, authenticity becomes important. So the idea of freedom also changes accordingly. So it's not freedom for my decision, but freedom for being authentic first and the responsibility towards the other. So the whole conception changes. That was second part. And third, when sir said that human beings are, there is some power dynamics and there are some hierarchies. So Buber talks about three kinds of relationship. One is genuine dialogue between friends. One is dialogue in a hierarchical relationship. Teacher and student, parent and child, doctor and patient, where the teacher knows more, but that doesn't mean that it's non-dialogical. And third is technical dialogue, where we have academic debates. So these are three ways of dialogue. They have their own limitations and they have their own requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Aruna. I think to the question whether you should continue to philosophize, I think whatever be that teaching is a social practice, I think teaching is a moral practice, assumes a central place in the entire understanding of teaching or the debates around teacher education. So I think the journey must continue as philosophers of education. We should continuously engage in this dimension, which she has very beautifully brought out. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That brings us to the end of the first day of the seminar. Tomorrow we'll be assembling at 9 o'clock over here. Okay? Thanks a lot.